Thank you, Ann. You know, we had a little debate earlier this week, and I enjoyed myself. This was a good opportunity for the President and I to talk to each other about the issues that people care about. It was a debate of substance. The moderator, Jim Lair, I thought did a nice job of raising topics for us to each discuss, and we spoke about those things. I got the chance to ask some of the questions that people across America have wanted to ask the President. I asked him, for instance, why it was that with 23 million Americans out of work or struggling to find a good job, he spent his first 2 years fighting for Obamacare instead of fighting for them. And I got to ask him why it was, with gasoline prices almost twice as high as when he took office, he spent his time cutting in half the number of permits and licenses for drilling oil and gas in this country. I got to ask him as well why, with huge deficits, he spent $90 billion investing in companies like Solyndra. I got to ask him why, with him having said in the past that these levels of deficits that he'd seen in the past were considered un-American by him, why he doubled those deficits and put in place almost as much debt held by the public as all the prior presidents combined. And then, of course, I had one last question. That was why it was that when he ran for office, he promised that by this year, health insurance premiums would be down by $2,500 a family. But instead, they're up by $2,500 a family. And don't forget, with the median family income in America, it's $50,000 a year. That $5,000 difference is a huge difference to the American people. And so I'm convinced that you will have the chance to hear his answers or his not answers. Now, of course, days later, we're hearing his excuses, and next January we'll be watching him leave the White House for the last time. We did agree in some areas. One area we agreed upon was that we're going to take two very different views about where America would go. My path is very different from the path that he would pursue. His path, for instance, would continue to raise deficits larger. We'd have deficits of $1 trillion a year for each of the next 4 years. That would lead to national debt of roughly $20 trillion. I'm convinced that would crush the American dream for our children. I think it's both wrong economically. I think it's immoral. My path is instead to cut federal spending, to cap federal spending, and get us on track to a balanced budget. Now, he also made it very clear they plan on raising taxes. You probably heard the Vice President. He blurted out the truth again this week. And he said they are, in fact, going to raise taxes by $1 trillion. Actually, with Obamacare, it really becomes $2 trillion. That, of course, will make it harder for small businesses to hire people and to employ people. It'll make it harder for middle-income families. By the way, a study came out this week that showed with all his spending and all his borrowing and all the interest on that debt, that he will ultimately have to raise taxes on middle-income families by $4,000 a year. This commitment I make to you, I will not raise taxes on middle-class families. He will, if he is re-elected, he will install Obamacare. And with it, your premiums are going to go up an extra $2,500 above what they already are in your current health care plan. That's according to Congressional Budget Office. My plan is that I will finally get control of the excessive costs in health care by repealing and replacing Obamacare with real reforms. And then you see that big sign behind me. Well, you can kind of see that big sign behind me. You saw it earlier. The President admitted that under Obamacare, under his plan, he is cutting $716 billion from Medicare. And by the way, that accounts for $44 billion right here in Florida. It would mean that 540,000 Floridians would lose Medicare Advantage. I can tell you this. When Paul Ryan is elected Vice President and I'm elected President, we'll restore that money to Medicare and honor the promise made to our seniors. And then there was his jobs plan. He was asked how he'd get the economy going, and he basically said it's the status quo. He's going to keep doing what he's been doing. He wants another stimulus. How'd the first one work out? He wants to hire more government workers. He wants to pick winners and losers between surrender and actually losers in his case. And we know where that leads. We've seen the last 4 years. We don't want 4 more years like the last 4 years. I have a plan that takes advantage of the extraordinary opportunity that exists in America right now, that's going to get this economy going and create jobs, and more jobs. 12 million jobs in specific. And they are number one. Take advantage of our oil, our coal, our gas, our nuclear, our renewables. The estimate is that we'll get 3.5 to 4 million new jobs, not just in the energy sector, but also in manufacturing and other sectors, as our energy is low cost and abundant. That's number one. Number two, we're going to make trade work for us by opening up markets, particularly in Latin America. And we're going to crack down on any nation that cheats on trade like China's been cheating. Number three, we're going to make sure our workers have the skills they need to succeed. So we're going to take our training programs in Washington, of which there are 47. They report to 8 agencies. Think of all the overhead and the waste. I'm going to take the money that comes from that. I'm going to give Florida its fair share and say, Florida, you train your people the way you think best for the job. And for the skills of tomorrow, we've got to make sure that people across this country learn some of the lessons that have been taught right here in Florida by your great Governor, Jeb Bush. He did a great job in education. He grades schools in Florida, A through F, so you know which schools are doing well and which are not. And if a school fails consistently, well, then kids are given a choice to go to another school. We're going to make sure that nationally we grade our schools and we finally give parents and children the choice to choose their own school. And by the way, the key to education is going to be this. Put the kids and their parents and the teachers first and the teachers' union behind. Number four, you're not going to get small businesses to grow and thrive, or big businesses to grow, if they think we're on the road to Greece, and that's why it's so critical that we finally balance our budget. I'll do that. And number five, one more. We have to champion small business. That's where jobs come from. We've got to help small business people. I'm going to keep their taxes down. The president's tax plan will kill 700,000 jobs. Mostly in small business. My plan will help create 7 million jobs. My tax plan. I'm going to keep the taxes down on small business. I'm going to get regulators to encourage small business, not crush them. And we're going to take that big cloud that kills jobs away from small business. We're going to get rid of Obamacare. These things will get this economy going. Now I'm optimistic. I want you to know that great days are ahead. America's greatest days are not in the past. It may be a little cloudy today, but the sunshine is coming through, guys. I've had the occasion throughout my life to see something about the great qualities of the human spirit exhibited in the American people time and time again. I know something about great human beings in this country. It's that gives me the confidence that our future will be so bright, because I've seen how Americans respond to challenge and even to tragedy. I was in Atlanta for an event not too long ago, and one of my classmates from business school was there. He had been involved in an accident a few years ago and had become quadriplegic. It only moved his face and mouth, and he has to be moved around in a wheelchair, and yet he, on a hot day, had made the effort to be there in the crowd to cheer one of his classmates, and it touched my heart to see him. I motioned him to come forward. I saw a parting where he was coming through, people moving aside so they could get his chair up close to the front, and he came up and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I recall all that he'd been doing over the last several years. Despite his great tragedy, he stayed involved in his businesses and had devoted himself to spinal cord research so that other people wouldn't suffer the same kind of tragic loss of his ability as he had suffered. So I put my hand on his shoulder and I reached over and I said, Billy, I love you and God bless you. It was a great occasion to say hi to my good friend, and he passed away the next day.
Thank you.
And I thought what a blessing it was for me to see him on that last day and acknowledge to him my respect for him. It reminded me of an experience I had some years before. I was serving as a pastor in my congregation at church.